Hello, my name is Benjamin Lee, and I just want to welcome everyone. It is now 1 p.m., so we'll begin our presentation shortly. Today on April 5th, we will have our presentation on how do we measure bike share success. For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box and we'll be able to answer those after the presentation. Here's a list of sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. I would like to thank all of the participating chapters, divisions, and universities for making these webcasts possible. These are the list of upcoming webcasts. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit utahapa.org/webcast and register for your webcast of choice. We're now offering distance education webcasts to help you get your ethics or law credits before the end of the year. These webcasts are available to view at utahapa.org webcast archive. Follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook to receive up-to-date information on the Planning webcast series sponsored by chapters, divisions, and universities. To log your same credits for attending today's webcast, please go to planning.org/cm, select today's date, then select today's webcast. This will be available for 1.5 cm credit. And at this time, we'll start with a poll question. Okay, we have 8% for I use bike share in my city, and 14% my city has bike share but haven't used it. 12% I've used bike share in another city, and majority 66% I've never used bike share, and 80% has voted. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the next poll. Okay, 87% has voted. 6% said yes, operational bike share system. 12% said yes to bike share system in planning stages, and 82% said no. Okay. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the presenter for today. Scott Mullen is General Manager of Hubway. Before joining Alter Bicycle Share, Scott ran the National University Program for Zipcar and has also worked in print and broadcast media, including as Managing Editor of the Ride magazine. Scott was a charter board member of the Livable Streets Alliance, a nonprofit organization that challenges people to think differently and to demand a system that balances transit, walking, and biking with automobiles to make Metro Boston more livable. And Jessica Robertson is Transportation Coordinator at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. In addition to her other work on transportation finance and bicycle pedestrian issues, Jessica manages the regional implementation of the Hubway Bike Share Program, a partnership between the cities of Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, the town of Brookline, and Alter Bicycle Share. Prior to joining MAPC, Jessica was Program Director for the City of Boston Bicycle Program. Okay, so at this time, I'll change the presenter to Scott. Hello?
Hey, Ben, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How do I sound? Am I too loud? Too hot on the mic?
No, it sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, so let me know if there are any issues seeing my screen. I've used a Prezi presentation. Are we all set?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. So, well, thanks for having me, first of all. I'm going to get started. Jess and I have a lot to talk about. I know that we're already a few minutes past, but just try to stop us because we love talking about this stuff. So what we have here is just our first slide. This is obviously the Hubway I work for as general manager, but Alta Bicycle Share, the company that I work for, we run Capital Bike Share in DC, in Chattanooga, Melbourne, Australia. We'll be launching New York and Chicago later this year. So a lot of great bike intel, bike share intel in these slides. So let's get to it. We saw a lot of you don't or have never actually firsthand experienced bike share. So what is it? Bike share is an enterprise, and it's important to make that distinction. This is not these aren't bikes as toys. This is literally a transit system. I'm getting an echo. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So I'm getting a little bit of an echo, but I'm going to keep going. Enterprise-level urban transit solution. And it goes so far beyond just cycling. I think bicycling, especially in an urban setting, has a lot of baggage with it. It tends to be only the most intense riders or the outlaw types that ride downtown, when really it's something for everybody. And it touches on a lot of the issues that urban areas face today. Now let's look at the first. It's active transportation. Now these numbers are based on just 2012 alone. Hubway launched in July of 2011, and just in 2012 alone, we had 23 million calories burned. We have an obesity epidemic in this country. Clearly this is a solution, or at least part of a solution, for people in urban areas. It's green. It's an environmentally friendly mode of transit, which is obviously good from a greenhouse gas standpoint. 360,000 pounds of carbon were offset. And again, this is in 2012 alone, not counting the half season of 2011. It's an efficient mode of transportation, both for the end user and the planner. When you think about, you have 50 or 60 feet width of road, how are you going to accommodate all users? It's clear that automobiles, their primacy is waning, and hopefully will continue to do so in a more rapid fashion. It's a much more efficient and smart use of space when you integrate pedestrian accommodation, bicycle accommodation. And I'm not saying outlaw the cars. I'm saying let's share that very vital and expensive public resource that is our public streets. And it's cheap. If you think about traditional transit, the Second Ave subway in New York is a great example. We're clocking in at about $2 billion per mile. And I think the original footprint of Hubway was 61 stations, 610 bicycles in the city of Boston, and it was a capital investment of about $3 million, perhaps. Clearly, this is pennies on the dollar. And when you think about the nearly 700,000 trips we've had in just 12 and a half months of operation, that's a huge bang for the transit buck, and especially in the time of sequestration, when you can be more efficient with very dwindling dollars, it always helps. And I think the best thing, and we can't forget this, is cycling is fun. People get on bikes and they see a city in a way that they maybe haven't seen it before, or maybe haven't been on a bike since they were 12 years old, and people are really rediscovering both cycling and the city around them. It's been a huge success here in Boston, Cambridge, Brookline, and Somerville. So moving along, as I said, I work for Alta Bicycle Share. I'm not going to dwell on that, but we do run bicycle transit networks across America and the world. And what we run are what's called third-generation bike share networks. Now, first gen is literally, I think it was Copenhagen or Netherlands. It was somewhere in Europe in the late 60s. They painted a bunch of bicycles white, and they just left them around. It's a great idea, but not very good in execution. It's not very efficient. Is your bike going to be there when you come out? People didn't really value the bikes at all. They weren't tied to them at all. Those who weren't using them were throwing them in the canals, I think is the famous use for those bikes. Version 2, Gen 2, is more of a kind of lending library where, like Harvard has a current program where you can sign up to be a member and then you go in and get a bike, but you have to go to a central location and you have to bring it back when you're done. There's also a coin-operated option that is working in Europe right now as well. But again, you don't tie the person to the bike. There's no accountability beyond that 50-cent token or whatever you put in. So really what we have now is third gen. We've got a robust locking system. We use Wi-Fi. We use credit card transactions. Every bike that leaves is connected to a credit card, and you'd be surprised how honest that makes people. Now, not every city has bike share. Now, I typically say you need 3 things for that. You need probably 400 things, but there's 3 big ones, 3 or 4 big ones. You need a strong bike culture where people are already riding and they already want the streets to be more calm and more accommodating for those modes that are not motorized. You need a strong advocacy network. What we have here in Boston are the Boston Cyclist Union, Mass Bike, and the Livable Streets Alliance. You need good infrastructure. You need to have a place on the road for people to feel comfortable to ride. And again, you know, the kind of sniff test, as they say, is would my grandmother feel safe doing this, or would my mother feel safe doing this? And if you have a 4-lane road with no markings and really no enforced speed limits, it might as well be a highway. And quite frankly, even when I was a little bit younger than I am now, I wouldn't feel comfortable riding on roads like that. You have to carve out a space, a shared space, to entice people to get on the road on 2 wheels. And lastly, you really need strong leadership at the top. You need to have all the people pushing and the advocacy groups pushing for changes to be made on the ground. But what we had here in Boston was Mayor Menino drawing a line in the sand and saying, I'm sick of being on the worst list of Bicycling Magazine for cities. Boston really is a city that's ripe for cycling. It's a very small city. It's compact. A lot of twisty, turny roads, beautiful vistas, not far distances to cross. I mean, it should be a great cycling city, is what Mayor Menino said probably 6 years ago now. And I think going from 500 meters of bike lane to 50 miles, which is what we have now, and now we're talking about cycle tracks and all that. It's really been this push from the top to make this happen. And "the car is no longer king" is one of his most famous quotes, at least among cyclists here in Boston. So do you want to jump in at any point? You're good? Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So what we have here, this is the equipment that we use is manufactured by the Public Bike System Company, PBSC, commonly known as the Bixie bikes, based out of Montreal. And as you can see here, these are mobile, modular, and solar. And what that means from a planning standpoint is you don't have to have us situated next to electricity. There's no drilling. We don't have to call DigSafe. We map out a footprint of minimum 41 feet, which will allow a 15 dock point station, and a 6-foot footprint. Make sure that we have the ADA access that we need all around, and we're good to go. So modular, what the modular means is if we find that capacity, demand is outstripping capacity, as long as we have the space to do it, we can then go and add additional docking points. You see here that at the top of the screen, that's called a B plate. It's hanging in the air. There's 4 docking points there, and that's 10 feet long by 3 feet wide. And essentially we can plop those down as far as we go. What we're looking at right now is South Station in Boston, which has 47 docking points. It is the second largest in our fleet, in our stations, the first largest being North Station. We did notice at the very beginning that the transit patterns, we'll talk about those in a minute, the transit patterns that we were seeing from regional rail at North Station is commuters would come in, get off the train, get on a bike, and use the bike for their last mile to work or wherever they were going. we only had 35 docking points at North Station, and within about a month, it was clear that demand was outstripping capacity. We added 3 more docking points to bring that up to 47, and I've actually just increased it one more time. We're at 54 dock points now. We just launched that station last Monday, and the patterns are there. It's a very, we call it a tidal pattern. The commuters come in the morning, and that station empties out very quickly, so we have to be sure to fill it to match the demand. And then in the afternoons, we have to make sure that it's nearly as all those commuters are now doing the reverse trip. Now it's solar, as I said, so we don't have to do any digging or anything. And it's mobile. We may find, and this has happened in the past, that we put a station down, assuming that it's going to do a certain level of ridership and usage and utilization, and it just doesn't. And we know it could do better somewhere else. As long as we have a site plan approved, we literally go in with a crane and we pick it up, we put it on the truck, we drive it to where it's going, we put it back on the ground. This is a process that takes about 30 to 40 minutes from when our crew first arrives to when they're driving away with this on the back of a truck. So you can't do that with a train line or bus rapid transit. So very flexible. We can react to conditions very quickly. And this is South Station when it's full. It is a beautiful site. These are all of our branded Hubway bikes with the New Balance logo. They're the title sponsor of the Boston section of this network. So this is a graph I put together. It's a typical day. This was just a random day last August, and it really shows the peak demand during the weekday. This is, again, a very commuter-heavy time, and we see patterns like this. Nearly 200 bikes were in use, between 7:30 and 8:30. On this particular day, and you see that huge spike in the morning, a little dip in sustained of about 80 to 100 bicycles in use on any given hour during the day, people running back and forth to meetings and whatnot, tourists and from out of town taking a spin, and then you see a slightly less spiky jump in the afternoon. Because most people have to be into work about 8 or 9, but when they leave or if they go straight home tends to vary. So it's less pronounced in the afternoon, but there still is that spike. Now, if we take a look at an average weekend, you'll see this big, beautiful bell curve starting right around 9 o'clock in the morning with 60 bikes and peaking at about 175 around the 2, 3, 4 o'clock hour, and then dipping down for the evening. So this tends to be much more, much longer trips. The commute trips during the morning and evening, people they're not lollygagging. They have a place to go and they have a deadline to get there. But these trips tend to be a little bit longer, a little bit more roundabout. People aren't in as much of a rush. You will see over to the left of the screen that little spike around 1 o'clock when the T closes. This is all the college students heading back to the dorms. They don't want to pay for a cab. So let's look at these side by side again just to get the impact. You see the way we have to deal with the system, the way we operate the system is much different Monday to Friday. Requires different types of effort, no less effort on the weekend, just different types of effort. And one of the things with bike share, it's not like car sharing in that car sharing is an out and back system where you pick up a vehicle, you do whatever you need to do with it. You need to bring it back to the exact location that you picked it up from, because that's where the next member expects it to be. This is a one-way system, and the bikes can go anywhere, which means you're going to get full stations and you're going to get empty stations. And full and empty are equally bad to us because that means a member or a casual user can't get a bike when they want one, or they can't dock a bike when they need to. And nothing is more frustrating than racing across town to get to a meeting and finding out that the bike share station closest to that meeting is full, and you have to go to the next closest station. Now, how do we deal with this? Traditionally, bike share operators do what's called rebalancing. And this is one of the Hubway rebalancing vans. with one of our Rockstar rebalancers coming out 2 at a time. Essentially, these vans can hold 22 bicycles, and they can redistribute the bikes to meet the demands of the system. We have 2 on the ground, and a third is actually coming in next week. We're going to put it into circulation beginning in May. We have been launched now since Tuesday. Very excited about that. We're averaging, I think we had 900 rides on Tuesday, 1,100 on Wednesday, 1,500 yesterday, and this is only on, we're not fully deployed yet, it's only on about maybe 800 bicycles. So clearly people are very excited that we're back on the ground. Now, when I said before that traditional operations do rebalancing, what I meant by that is we have access to data in real time, as does the end user. We have a Spot Cycle, a smartphone app called Spot Cycle. It's a free app, and it will tell you where the bike share stations are relative to you. If you turn on your location, you're the little blue dot, and you can see all the bike share stations around you. And they're shaded in terms of how many bicycles they have. If it's a 15 dock station and it's 7 bicycles in it, it's shaded about half red. Full stations are full red. Empty stations are totally translucent. So transparent, excuse me. What we do with that data feed is we crunch the numbers on a daily basis to make sure that we're keeping up with demand. Demand shifts. There's an event in town like the Boston Marathon. That's going to shift. That's going to be a big spike for us, and we have to make sure that we look at the historical data from last year so we know where those where we can expect those demand spikes to be, and we'll actually set the system up for success the night before or the morning before. We talked about North Station. We know it's going to be empty by 7:30 in the morning, so what we do is the night before we fill it up, and we know that all the destination stations that are downtown near the Central Business District are going to fill when North Station empties, because that's where the bikes and the riders are going. So we almost empty those stations the night before. We'll leave a couple of bikes because we don't want it to be totally empty. And then we fill the van with those bikes from those stations, so that when the rebalancer comes in at 6 in the morning, the first thing they do is they go to these massive origin stations, as we call them, and they replenish them. And we're able to get 150 bike trips in 90 minutes out of a station that only has 47 docking points by doing that. And again, it's pre-balancing because we have the data, we know where the demand is going to be, and again, we're crunching it in real time. We can react in real time to shifts in patterns when students come back or leave for the summer, when the tourists start coming in. There are different patterns to each kind of season that we have here. Rebalancing is reacting, and that's not quick enough. If we're going to be an enterprise-level transit system, not only do the trains have to run on time, they have to be at the station for you when you get there. So, huge part. I mean, this is the biggest part of our operation is the rebalancing. You would think it would be the maintenance on the bicycles, and that's part of it. But we're going to be running probably 3 8-hour shifts. I'm sorry, 2 8-hour shifts so 32 hours per day just in rebalancing, and that's before we bring in the new van. So if you look here, we have a bicycle rebalancing trailer. This is our head mechanic, Andrea, who weighs about 90 pounds and had no problem hauling 200 pounds of Hubway bikes. These are not light bikes. These are built for to be rugged and to last outside all season long. We wanted to obviously lower our carbon footprint. I think as Ben mentioned, I used to work for Zipcar, and one of the ways that in many of our markets, one of the ways we dealt with our vehicles is we managed them by bicycle. We're not like Hertz or Enterprise where you want to move 20 cars from the airport, you just get a van load of retired guys. We had 20 cars spread out all around a neighborhood in maybe 10 different spots of 2. You're not going to effectively deal with that sort of a system and fleet by car, so we would do it by bicycle. Now I come to Hubway and we have to deal with all of our bicycles by van, and that was something that really was baking my noodle when I first got here. I said, we can do this better. So beyond the green benefits of doing a trailer like this, We've also noticed that, for example, around Fenway Park, there is absolutely no way that we can balance the 3 or 4 stations that are near Fenway on game day. But Fenway has bike lanes leading to and from it on almost every road, and this trailer has a footprint that will fit within a bike lane. So we can use micro zones, this trailer for micro zones, and do the balancing that we previously hadn't been able to do effectively. And again, full or empty is equally bad to us. We want to make sure that it never happens. So this is just a snapshot of year from July 28, 2011 until the end of November in 2012. Now, we are a seasonal system here. We do not operate in the winter. So at the end of November, we pack everything up. As I mentioned, we're mobile, we're modular, we're solar. We pick all of our stations up, which last year peaked at 105 on the ground, and we store them in a warehouse along with all 1,065 bicycles. Now, we had 676,000 trips to be exact, and that's just in 12.5 months of operation. 11,000 memberships sold with 7,000 active annual members currently, and more every day now that we're back on the ground, and 140,000 unique casual riders. This has been a huge success beyond what anybody could have predicted. You know, when we launched in July of 2011, you know, we really were throwing darts at a dartboard, and we said, well, let's try to get 100,000 trips in the first year, which, you know, 2 years ago, which is ancient times in terms of bike share, we thought that would be a stretch goal. We hit that in 10.5 weeks. We really haven't stopped since. We had more than 530,000 trips just last year alone. The first half of the year, 600 bicycles in Boston. The second half of the year, beginning in late July, early August, we expanded to the neighboring municipalities of Brookline, Somerville, and Cambridge. So we now really are truly a regional transit network. And as you can see here, this is just a snapshot of part of our system. It doesn't encompass Brookline, which is just off the bottom of this map, but this really shows the density that we strive for. Some of the more successful stations, not surprisingly, are the ones that have proximity to other stations. If you have 20 bike share stations, for example, to put in your city, do not put them in 20 far-flung corners. It's not the way bike share works. Bike share is most successful when there are options and when there is density. And you can see that at the top of the screen, Somerville is a little bit stretched. They have 8 stations in the first round. They have 4 more now that they're going to fill in some gaps. And not surprisingly, those stations being kind of outliers were, they weren't unsuccessful, they were just less successful than some of the ones in Cambridge, for example. You'll see right around Brattle Square, Kennedy School, right in the center of the map. That's Harvard Square. And within a week of launch, the central Harvard Square station jumped to top 5 in the network. It was that busy. And you know, clearly that was because of the proximity not only of the other Cambridge stations down Mass Ave and through Kendall and Central Squares, but right across the river on the Alston side of the Harvard campus. Just plenty of places to go, and it really made sense for people to use it. The green dot is the locus of the station. The red circle is a 1/4 mile radius, and the kind of pink, I hope you can see it, the pink lighter circle is a 1/2 mile radius. We really would prefer the red circles to be overlapping, and as you can see in Boston, that's the case. I think the kind of gold standard for international bike share networks is 500 to 600 meters between stations, and that's really when you're going to get the best density and the best efficiency for the end user. Now, in terms of revenue, this is a little graph I put together right before here, so it's slapped together, I apologize. And it's a snapshot from last July through November, and this is of revenue. Now, the over to the left, membership revenue, annual members, you can see in July they were 40%. August we had a spike to 50%, and that's because we jumped into those new municipalities that I told you about, Brookline, Somerville, and Cambridge, so we had a spike in annual membership purchases. But typically it's around 1/3 of the revenue comes in from those memberships, and casuals typically are about 2/3. And then moving over to the right there, and yeah, there we go. Sorry, I couldn't see part of it. You can see that the annual usage revenue is just really in the pits. Our annual members are very smart. They know that the first 30 minutes of any trip they take is free, which is one of the hallmarks of bike sharing. We want to incent short transit trips. We do not want to incent people to take this bike out as if it were a bicycle rental and take it for 4 hours. If you do, you're going to get charged 50 or 60 bucks. You're going to be mad at me, and I'm going to be mad at you because I want that bike to be in the system, turning over multiple trips per day. And you can see the casual revenue usage revenue is 80 to 90%. And clearly this demonstrates that it's the casual user really that subsidizes the system for the rest of them, the rest of the riders. Whether that's casual tourist use, whether it's someone coming in only infrequently into town, not enough to pay for an annual membership, but they want to ride it once in a while. It's huge, and I think the casual members, their average trip at the beginning of the system was about 70 minutes, and that trip is worth $6 to us. It's a $5 one-day pass, and you can take as many trips as you want in that time. All trips under 30 minutes are free. Anything over 30 to 60 is $2. 60 to 90 is $6. Every half hour after that is $8. So all the way up to $100. Again, it's not because I want $100. It's because I want the bike back in the system. But this is huge. When you start talking about how do you measure success, which I know we're going to get into through Jess's portion of this. It should be self-sustaining, and I think casual usage revenue and casual fee revenue is key to that goal. Oh, there we go. It looks like we're at the end of mine. So this is how you feel when you ride bike share. And with that, I think we do questions at the end, I think, so we'll pass to Jess.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes, cool. Okay. Let's see. There we go. All right, so my name is Jessica Robertson. I work for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, and we have served as the regional coordinator for the Hubway system because it's a partnership between these 4 different municipalities. So at various points throughout the planning and the implementation and the operating process, we've sort of been the agency herding all the cats. Today our question is how do we measure bike share success? And the first step to figuring that out is defining what success means. So there are financial and operational components to success. So whether or not the system is self-sufficient from a financial perspective, and whether or not there are bikes at the stations where there need to be, those parts Scott talked about a little bit. I'm going to talk about the policy goals, the bigger picture things that we as planners are all trying to do and trying to use bike share as a tool to get there. So the first is mobility. So transportation planning is all about trying to get as many people where they need to go as easily as possible, and bike share is about adding one more thing to the menu of transportation options for people. So people are using Hubway for lots of different things, but number one, it's certainly being used for commuting. This was how we asked the question last year, and then this year we asked it a little bit differently. We asked people to rank the different kinds of trips they take on Hubway. So as you can see, the first commuting is still number 1, but then personal errands and entertainment trips are still pretty high up there. We also know that Hubway users are multimodal, So 65% own a car. I'm sorry, I think it's on auto advance, and I have to somehow turn that off. There we go. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so 65% of Hubway users own a car, but then a lot of them also have car sharing. Almost half have a monthly transit pass, which in Boston means you get unlimited trips for $79 a month. And then a lot of Hubway users do have their own bike. I personally have my own bike and also have a Hubway membership. So Hubway indeed is one of a whole menu of different options that people have. Transit in particular, Hubway was from the very beginning conceived of as an extension of the transit system, and you can see that a lot of Hubway stations are located near transit stations, which are those little T's inside the circle. And Hubway users definitely use bike share and transit together, as Scott was talking about. It's the first mile or the last mile. You know, they're substituting a transfer, or in some other way, they're using the two together. So Hubway users definitely do both on the same trip, and they do both on any given day. But at the same time, Hubway users are also substituting transit trips. We had a data contest last fall where we released the data from 500,000 Hubway trips to the public and invited them to submit data analysis and data visualization. You can check out all of the submissions that we got at hubwaydatachallenge.org. That website's on the bottom left. We were really blown away by all of the amazing things that we got back. This is a screenshot of the winning visualization, which compared Hubway trip data with MBTA historic trip data to actually see if you're going between a certain origin and destination, is it faster to get there on Hubway or by transit? And if you can see that vertical line at 0, everything to the right of that are trips where it was faster to take Hubway, which is the vast majority of trips. And the two biggest dots right at the top are North Station and South Station, which are, as Molly described, the largest Hubway stations in the system, and they're also linking with commuter rail, Amtrak, subway, and buses. So there's definitely a lot of interrelation there. So another piece of the mobility puzzle is getting people where they need to go as quickly and as easily as possible. So when Hubway users are substituting a complicated or a slow transit trip for a faster and easier bike share trip, we are improving mobility. So Capital Bike Share also did a survey of their members, and they asked about induced trips, so trips that members took because of Hubway, because of Capital Bike Share that they may not have taken otherwise. And in fact, 44% said that they had done that. You know, this is a much harder to measure one, and a lot of the reasons that people gave for the induced trips were relating to other transportation options. So they were saying it's too far to walk, or it's inconvenient to take transit, or parking's too expensive. So it is hard to know, though, whether those trips really wouldn't have happened at all, or whether they just would have happened closer to home. But we do have, you know, as a cyclist, as I'm sure many of you are also cyclists and you can relate to this, there's sort of a, you know, a gut experience of biking opens up all these different possibilities of places you can go in a city. And this at the bottom is a quotation from one of our user survey comments sections, and one that I really like about the city feels smaller and more in reach than ever. So our next goal is to improve public health. The city of Boston, or the Boston region, and Massachusetts as a whole have about a little over half of adults are overweight or obese, and Hubway members are pretty much on par with that. Almost half of Boston area adults also don't get enough exercise on a daily basis. So active transportation is, of course, one of the most important ways to maintain a healthy weight and ensure daily exercise, because you don't need to pay for a gym membership or stay motivated with your training plan. You're baking it into your everyday routine by using biking or walking for transportation. So that's definitely one thing we want to get more people doing through bike share. So Hubway users, before they joined Hubway, some of them were biking, but most of them were not biking very often, and almost half of them biked. This almost never piece of the pie chart is 3 times per year or less, so that's very rarely. And now Hubway members average over 10 trips per month. We also, this is another quote on the bottom from another member on our survey. There were just tons and tons of these stories of people who hadn't ridden a bike in a long time or had never ridden a bike for transportation, and all of a sudden they're biking all the time, or they've gone and bought their own bike and they're just biking hundreds and hundreds of miles now. So 59% of our members in the survey actually said that their physical activity increased because of Hubway, since they joined Hubway, and among those who said their physical activity increased, almost a quarter said it increased by more than 30 minutes a day, which is pretty impressive from a public health intervention perspective. So we've burned almost 30 million calories collectively, and Hubway members do say that they feel healthier and closer to their ideal weight. I'm not a public health person by training, so I questioned this idea of asking people if they feel healthier, but my public health colleagues tell me that that's a useful question to ask. So our next metric is the environmental impact. So in Massachusetts, about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation, and that sector is growing faster than any other sector. So in order to reduce our overall greenhouse gas emissions and do anything about climate change, we really have to tackle transportation, and that means shifting trips from car trips to lower emitting and non-emitting modes. And indeed, half of all trips in the U.S. are 3 miles or less, and 3/4 of those are made by car. So there's plenty of potential to shift those trips. And Hubway is indeed shifting some vehicle trips. So 65% of Hubway members own a car, and of those, we had almost half of them saying that they are replacing car trips in a typical week with Hubway trips. 36% of car owners replaced more than 4 trips each week. On average, Hubway members replaced a little over 1.2 trips per week per member, which comes out to about 88,000 car trips avoided so far. We're also replacing taxi trips. So we asked about both commute trips and non-commute trips, and taxi use was down for both of these. So it's not just people hopping on a Hubway bike to come home from the concert on a Friday night instead of a cab. They're also substituting taxi trips on their daily commute. And this guy, Tom, is one of my favorite examples of someone who has done this. He joined Hubway and 8 months later had lost 60 pounds and has some great quotes up here. He was taking cabs all the time before, and then he started using Hubway and he lost all this weight and he saved all this money. And he loves it so much he even goes out during his lunch break and rides around, and he's even started going on family bike rides with his kids on the weekends, where he and his wife ride Hubway bikes. So this is where mobility and health and environment all come together, and people can reach their destinations more easily at the same time that they're getting more exercise and at the same time that they're doing it in a way that benefits the environment. We also want to know if bike sharing can help boost the local economy. We do know bike and take transit are much more to the mall. Most likely they're less likely to walk or bike to the big box store. But this is a phenomenon that's a little harder to measure. So we've asked different questions to try and get at this over time. We do know that transportation biggest. So if people are saving money on transportation, that has an important impact. They have more money to spend on other things. Capital Bike Share had some really great results from their survey question about saving money, so we asked our members too. They didn't say that they said that they saved less money than Capital Bike Share users did, but I think the big difference there is that DC doesn't have an unlimited transit pass. You have to pay by the trip in DC, whereas in Boston, half of our members do have that unlimited monthly transit pass, so that every time they're riding Hubway, they may or may not be saving money, whereas in DC, you are saving money every time. We also know that Hubway members are more likely to visit a business if it's accessible by Hubway. That's pretty predictable. But then we also asked them specifically to think of their last Hubway trip where they made a purchase at a local business, and if they hadn't had Hubway, what would they have done? And 40% of those purchases, they said, would not have gone to a local business. So it would have either been online or at a chain store, or they wouldn't have made the purchase at all. So that's as close as we can get to saying that yes, Hubway does lead to more money in the pockets of local business owners. And this doesn't even start to talk about the tourist impact. So this is a survey of annual members, not the people who come in and use their credit card to buy a one-day pass. So we haven't even begun to measure whether Hubway is making Boston a more attractive tourist destination overall, or where tourists are spending their money depending on whether or not they're using Hubway. Another important goal of bike sharing is to increase access to biking among low-income communities. We know that in Boston, our low-income communities are less likely to have bike shops, and low-income people often will have, they'll be more concerned about bike theft in their neighborhood, or they'll have less space in their home to store a bike. So it is more difficult to use a bike for transportation. So bike share is one way we hope to expand access to biking. In addition, the benefits of bike share in terms of better access to transit, faster transportation, cheaper transportation, these things are especially important to low-income people and working families. And the fact that it's a 24-hour system is huge in a city like Boston, where we have a large healthcare sector with a lot of third shift workers, and yet at the same time our transit closes at 12:30 at night. However, Boston, like all other bike share systems that I've ever seen, is not particularly representative of the region. So we do have, our membership is skewed towards the more wealthier and more educated end of the spectrum, and also skewed ethnically, although not quite as much as the other two metrics. We do have some selection bias here, of course, because we did our member survey online, and so you're always going to miss certain people that way. And then also, you'll see here a huge percentage of the Boston region population is people who are currently in college, and yet they're not very well represented among Hubway members. We have seen somewhat disappointing membership rates among undergrads, but we're working on some different strategies in terms of new pricing models and different outreach strategies to try and bring those numbers up. So we might see that change this year. So you can see there is some correlation between different demographic factors. There's a strong correlation between race and income, but race and education are not very well correlated. What this says to me is that the biggest gap in terms of who are we not reaching with our Hubway message are people with a lower level of education. That no matter what race you are, no matter what other neighborhood factors or demographic factors, the people we're reaching are highly educated. The people we're not reaching are not as educated. So that's something we have to think about, how to do that better. Now this chart, if you look, the numbers down the right side show how many trips, actual trips, not self-reported trips, per month these members took. And what this shows is that if you look at the bottom bar, it's suddenly a lot more equitable across the different income levels, which says to me that for low-income people who are able to access Hubway, it becomes a really important transportation asset, and they're using it all the time. So I think it, it's not about people, low-income people aren't interested in Hubway or, something like that. It's just a matter of figuring out the best way to get those people able to access the system, because when they do, they use it just as much, if not more, than more privileged people who are accessing the system. So what are some of the barriers? One that's gotten a lot of press has been the credit card issue, because you need a credit or debit card to use bike share. Boston rates of unbanked households are lower than the national average. And then if you look at, even these demographic groups that have the highest rates, such as no high school degree, that's a high rate among that demographic group, but that's still a tiny sliver of the Boston population. That's unbanked households with no high school degree are only 1.8% of Boston households. Hispanic households with no credit or debit cards are only 1.2%. So there are tons of people out there in all of these demographic groups who do have a credit card and could be accessing Hubway, and they just haven't yet. Another reason why they might not be is there aren't enough stations in those neighborhoods. So these two maps show household income by census tract and household percentage minority, the density of minority households by census block group. The black outline is the city of Boston. Cambridge and Somerville are north of the river, and then Brookline is the little piece sort of sticking into the middle of Boston from the southwest. So as you can see, Boston in particular is fairly segregated, and the density of stations is also in the lower density minority areas and the wealthier areas, which also happen to be the downtown areas. So all four cities that are a part of Hubway are absolutely aiming towards expanding all the stations to these lower income areas. It's just a matter of you have to expand organically or the system doesn't function, so it's going to take a little while to do the fundraising to add all those stations to get further into the neighborhoods. So also Boston has done a subsidized membership program where low-income residents can get an annual membership for only $5. These are some screenshots of all of our different multilingual flyers advertising the program. This is very successful. In fact, the most successful effort to increase participation among low-income households of any city that's tried anything like this in the U.S. Boston signed up about 500 people, and a lot of them are using the system very regularly. But unfortunately, the program is only open to City of Boston residents, so if someone from Cambridge calls up, unfortunately they get turned down. And then also it is a grant-funded program, and the original funding has run out, so we are not sure at the moment how we'll be able to continue this program. But it is a model, I think, for other cities around the country, and hopefully to continue in our region and expand it to include our entire region. The other important equity piece is gender equity. We are not doing very well on this front, but we are getting better slowly. Last year we had 28% of Hubway members were women. This year it was 35%. Women also use the system a little bit differently. They're less likely to use Hubway for commuting, more likely to use it for exercise and recreation. And as you can see, among the different cohorts of how frequently people ride, there's the most equity in the least frequent riders, and the most frequent riders, the people who ride Hubway more than 30 times per month, are overwhelmingly male. I do think that Hubway and bike share in general has the potential to be sort of a gateway drug for biking. You can see here some quotes again from our survey. These are all from women, and you see a couple of them where Hubway was absolutely the thing that got them to try biking, and then they got hooked. But then the biggest thing that we need to fix in order to get more women biking is to address the infrastructure issue and provide more separation from traffic and provide a more comfortable, pleasurable biking experience. Then our last goal is one that's not stated quite as often, but to use bike share as a tool to sort of boost the city's overall bike friendliness. And one side of this coin is making the streets more, flow a little bit better and everybody get along a little bit better. Part of that is drivers have to learn to how to interact with bikes, and they have to get comfortable with bikes being there. They have to get used to expecting that a bike might be there if they're going to take a right turn. And bike share can make a big impact on that by just rapidly increasing the number of bikes on the street. And then the other way in which the other type of culture change that needs to happen is we need to break down these stereotypes of who a cyclist is, and bike share is a really unique way of doing that because it's automatically the concept is there that anybody can ride a bike for transportation and that anybody does ride a bike for transportation. So partly it's about people being able to picture themselves doing it, and then also this feeds back into the last point about the bike friendliness of the streets, because all those people in the cars are now much more likely to have tried biking themselves. So I'm going to close with a great example of sort of the paradigm shift that I think we've seen here in Boston, which is just a couple weeks before bike share launched in Boston back in 2011, there was this column by Brian McGrory in the Boston Globe suggesting that instead of launching a bike share program, we should instead ban bicyclists. And it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but the overall tone was definitely that cyclists are annoying and it's okay to not like them. And then a mere 18 months later, 19 months later, that same person, Brian McGrory, is now the editor of the Boston Globe. And soon after he took the helm, this editorial came out which explicitly stated that cyclists are people too, and drivers have a responsibility to behave nicely towards them. So this, I think, is a really incredible example of, a prominent source of the public discourse has made this big shift from cyclists are other people and they don't belong on the streets to we all deserve to share this space on the streets. So that's something that you can really only get in such a short time with bike share. You're not going to, it takes a long time if you do it one cyclist at a time, and by getting all of these people on bikes in such a short time, we've really managed to move the needle. So we are happy to take questions. Let's see. So Scott, you can unmute yourself, and then I think we go scroll through over here. Okay, so here's a question. Boston street layout is more challenging than others because it's not sort of a grid. So that is absolutely an obstacle to bike planning here in Boston. My boss just came back from a trip to Chicago the last couple days, and he's like, oh man, it's amazing. They're putting in all these cycle tracks because they've got this great grid street network, and they can just alternate which streets are for buses and bikes. And no, we can't do that here, unfortunately. It's also, we have a lot of narrow streets. There's a lot of competition for the space. So it is tougher. The major corridors for cars are also the major corridors for bikes. But gradually we're seeing more and more public acceptance of taking space away from parking, for example, or doing a road diet where instead of having 4 lanes, you have 2 lanes plus a center turning lane, and then taking that extra space and turning it into a cycle track or turning it into bike lanes. I know, me too. Oh, there's a interesting question here about gender equity for cycling, partly because women are more likely to have children and it's tougher to carry children on a bike. This is definitely something that we heard as a piece of feedback when we're doing outreach about the subsidized membership program, that there was, a lot of women were saying, well, where do I put my kid? And that's a really valid point. And I think for cycling in general, in the U.S., it's mainly an issue of we don't have the cool gear that they have in Europe. In Europe, you see all those awesome cargo bikes where you can fit like 2 kids and grandma and 3 bags of groceries in the cargo bike and get wherever you need to go, and it's just really hard to find good gear in the U.S. for cycling with kids. Bike share is a little bit different. The bikes have to be standardized or else the system doesn't really work, so you're never going to have child's bikes or child seats on the bikes. However, because you can do one-way rentals, it can still be really useful. So you can walk your kids to school, or take your kids on the train to school or the bus, and then on the way back you can take a Hubway bike. So you can still use it to mix and match your trips, even if you're traveling with kids. Or you can do like Tom did, and your kids can ride their own bikes and you can ride a Hubway bike.
I did see one question here about buying a disposable raincoat at the station. It's a great idea. Weather does affect our ridership, but I think to Jess's point, this is an option. It's a transportation option. One leg of your trip may be bike share, another might be cab, another might be a train or a personal car. There's really a lot of different ways to use this. But we definitely see that when the weather is bad or colder, we get a little dip in ridership.
Mm-hmm. I saw another question about the survey only capturing annual members as opposed to casual users, and how that might impact the demographics. I think that's definitely a really valid point. And we would love to have more information on the casual users, but it's much harder to get. One thing that we do know is happening is that a lot of students, back to this question of sort of, is the annual membership price a little too high for college students? We do see a lot of activity on the stations around college campuses where you'll see people will buy the one-day membership at 1 a.m. on a Friday night. So they're not a tourist, they're a college student riding back to their dorm, but they're willing to buy a $5 membership several times a semester, but paying $85 up front for the membership is a little steep. So we're actually hoping to launch very soon a monthly membership option, which would be more affordable. And other cities are also experimenting with other pricing models. So DC has piloted a monthly installment option where it's the same price as the annual membership, but you pay it in monthly installments. And Montreal, last I heard, was trying an actual pay-per-trip system where you still have your key fob like an annual member, but instead of paying $85 up front, you just pay a couple bucks per trip, which I think is a great model, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes in Montreal. We got some questions about the cost of the system. So the capital costs of the system were covered in part by a grant from the Federal Transit Administration, which paid for the stations themselves. And then 3 of the 4 municipalities also used CMAQ funds, which is Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality. That's another federal program that filters through the state Department of Transportation. They use that money to buy the bicycles and to help pay for some of the operating costs. We also, most of the municipalities have varying levels of sponsorships. So Scott mentioned New Balance is the title sponsor of the Boston system, but Harvard has also contributed a huge amount to put a number of stations on their campus. And private companies and other universities and hospitals, we've gotten lots of support from those institutions and corporations. And then some of the municipalities have put in their own money as well. Cambridge in particular has a system which I absolutely love from a planning perspective. They have a resident parking permit which costs I think $20 or $25 a year, and the revenue from all of those parking permits is mandated by a city ordinance to get spent on programs that will reduce vehicle miles traveled. So I just think that's a beautiful way to do it. And so part of that revenue has gone to fund their Hubway system, and it's also been used for bike parking and public education campaigns and all sorts of things. And then the operations of the system are also supported by the revenue from the system. So Scott, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
So yeah, I think each bike share network is unique in its goals from the outset and in the kind of business model behind it. The way that Hubway works is we half of the operations, which is roughly $24,000 per station per year, so averages out to $2,000 per station per month, rough number. Half of that is covered by the municipalities that are involved. The other half comes from system revenue. Now, the skin in the game for Alta, we're operators, but we're also partners. If the system revenue does not cover the half that isn't covered by the municipalities, we're on the hook for that. So we have an interest to run the best and most efficient network that we can, and also to make sure that we're covered. Oh, yeah, is that working?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're having trouble with the interface. I can only see one line at a time of these questions. Oh, there it is, beautiful. So one other thing, when we talk about overall system goals and how do you measure success, go all the way back to the RFP. The RFP in Boston was, we want to get people using active transportation. We want to get people out of their cars for single occupancy vehicle trips, and we want people to use bikes downtown. Now, New York City, for example, when their RFP came out, it was written specifically to get people in Manhattan, out of overcrowded trains. So you really have to look at each network from the fundamental level of what are they trying to achieve. Chattanooga, for example, with their system, they offered integrated locks and the first 60 minutes free. There's not going to be a whole lot of transit trips in Chattanooga. These are going to be more geared more towards tourists, people coming into town for conferences and such, and using it as an active option. So again, how do you measure success? Well, it really depends on the charter, if you will, of each system.
So there's another question here about were bike lanes already in place before bike share stations were installed, and have they grown simultaneously? Yes and yes is the answer to that. The City of Boston started from practically nothing in about 2007, but Cambridge had more bike lanes and bike infrastructure going back a couple decades, but all of the municipalities involved with Hubway have been increasing their lane miles of bike lanes and sharrows and cycle tracks even alongside promoting and installing the bike share system. And this also goes back to my last couple slides about the culture change issue, and we were just having a discussion last month with Mass DOT and the City of Boston about a particular corridor where it's sort of a prime location for a nice separated bike facility, but it's a little bit tricky in terms of how do you squeeze it in with the traffic needs. And Boston looked at this corridor a couple years ago, and they basically didn't even consider taking out a travel lane because they just thought, well, that's going to be a non-starter. And now, 2 years later, the conversation has completely shifted, and that's much more of a possibility. So, you know, it's important to have a certain amount of bike infrastructure in order to make your bike share system viable, but at the same time, it's a lot easier to get more and better bike infrastructure implemented when you have the base of public support that bike share helps build. Let's see.
I'm answering some by text right now. People saying, you know, how often do you have to fix the bicycles? Now, these bikes are about 41 pounds, which is probably 2.5 times what Lance Armstrong's bike weighs. They're not built for speed. If you're sweating on a Hubway, you're doing something wrong. They have 3-speed internal hubs, internal gearing, integrated lights front and back that are on all the time when the wheels are spinning, puncture-proof tires, graffiti-proof paint, you know, shellac on the outside. I mean, these things are really built to be robust and be outside all the time. We do check the bicycles once per month, and we have a team of fleet cyclists that go around and do this in the stations, just to make sure that, you know, air pressure is the way it should be and that the tires are true and all that. So, but in terms of repairs, you know, they don't get flats a whole lot, probably a couple of dozen last year, if you can believe it. Again, very robust design on these bikes.
There was a question a while ago about what stations are naturally rebalanced versus what stations are rebalanced by the rebalancing team. You know, it's actually usually a small subset of stations in a system that need regular rebalancing from the team. Every city has their stations, you know, whether it's on a top of a hill or it's a major commuter rail hub where a train arrives at a certain time and everyone gets off and wants a bike. But then there are other stations, like for example, the difference between North Station and South Station in Boston is very illustrative here. They're both major commuter hubs. But South Station gets a lot more traffic throughout the day from different types of people and different types of destinations, so that station balances itself very well, whereas North Station has very, very intense commuter traffic that needs a lot of help from the rebalancing team to keep it operating. Oh, there was another question about did we have data on age of Hubway members, and we absolutely do. The majority of Hubway members are either between 23 and 29 or between 30 and 39, and then there's sort of a gentle slope down in the older age groups, but it's the 18 to 22 demographic is really very surprisingly low, and that goes back to the student question.
So I have a question. How are communities chosen to participate in a Hubway-like system? Really, the communities choose to put out a bid and say we want to have a bike share system, and that's what happened through Jess's organization. MAPC helped write the RFP with Boston. It was always envisioned to be a regional network. Even though Boston got the funding in place and launched first, it was always assumed that it would be on both sides of the river. For anyone who's been here to Boston, it's a very compact city. You could be in another town and not even know it. You'd still think you're Boston. But they know it, and they are very territorial about each other. Now, are we going to expand beyond this? Absolutely. I think a lot of the neighboring cities are interested. They've seen the success of this. They want to continue. I think from Alta's standpoint, we knew that Boston, Metro Boston would be a successful place to go. I mean, if another city that maybe doesn't have the density or doesn't have a transit network, we may not want to operate a system for them, but that does not stop them from going to another provider.
I've got one here about do certain dress codes in the workplace, especially for women, significantly inhibit use of bikes? So I love this question. I personally ride my bike every single day, and I very rarely change my clothes once I get to work. I make it a point to bike in whatever I'm wearing whenever possible, and that's one thing that is definitely great about bike sharing. Because people are much more likely to just hop on the bike in whatever they're wearing, and then everybody else on the street sees that person riding the bike in their business suit, in their skirt, and their high heels. And so then suddenly they're like, oh wow, that looks pretty easy. I guess I could try that too. Also, the Hubway bikes are very easy to ride in any clothing. They're a more upright posture. They have the step-through frame. They have a full chain guard and fenders. So you really can't just hop on in any clothes. In terms of rain, obviously the fenders help if it's very light rain, but we certainly see ridership go down, like the daily rides will be lower on days where it's really, really rainy or really, really cold or something, as would be expected.
Yeah, and that really reinforces the fact that this is just another transportation option. It's not that people don't come into town if it's raining and they can't use Hubway. They're just using another mode, and maybe it's a train or a bus or a vehicle. But really helping people rethink their commute and rethink how they navigate the city. Hubways, we tend to follow the transit network. As you can imagine, we want to link up with transit, both the regional rail and the local light rail and subway options and key bus terminals. But we also want to be in the middle where transit may not go, and this is a really economical way to do that.
There's another question here about how involved has the transit agency been, and in Boston, the MBTA has not been, it's not compatible in a one-to-one sense with the Hubway system, but they have acted as the pass-through for our Federal Transit Administration funds. My understanding is in London, I've never used the Boris bike system, but my understanding is that your bike share card is the same as your transit card, and you can use them at both, which would be awesome, and we'd love to do that someday. So, write your letters to your elected representatives and whatnot. But yeah, so the MBTA has definitely been, a partner in this process. The commuter rail, the company that is contracted to run our commuter rail system, sponsored the Hubway station at South Station, and then there are lots of Hubway stations on transit, near transit stations. Some of them are on actual transit property, but a lot of them are not as well. They're just right next to it. They've also the MBTA has also started putting Hubway stations on their local station area maps that they have. So when you get off the subway and you're looking at the street map, they will have the Hubway stations on there as they cycle through those, replacing those maps. They're adding Hubway stations to the new ones.
So I see actually two quick operational questions I'll bang through. One is about the solar power and what happens on cloudy days. Where we site, and as a planner you'd be interested that you need to site these in a place typically south-facing that has good solar exposure. We need to have a minimum of 6 hours per day of direct sunlight to kind of keep these things running without the huge operational headache of changing batteries. What we've done on stations that are in less than ideal solar conditions, but that's the only option we have, is we've actually stocked them with 2 marine grade batteries, so they last a little bit longer. We still have to swap them out occasionally, probably once per week or so, and then obviously at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season, the solar exposure just goes down naturally, and we have to up the battery replacements. Another one was a quick question about the 32 shift hours per day to operate rebalancing. This is 4 8-hour shifts, and a typical crew can handle an average of 3 to 4 stations, depending on how close they are. We give them menus based on the most recent data. We tell them what their priorities are. So we've literally taken the thinking out of the truck, and we have a dispatcher guiding people around for kind of 911s or hot shots, as we call them.
We've gotten a bunch of questions about helmets. So this has definitely been a hot topic in Boston. One of the questions we got here was, what do cities do when they have a mandatory helmet law? We have, the Alta Bike Share, a company that Scott works for, runs the Melbourne, Australia bike share system, and they do have a mandatory helmet law, which is very strictly enforced, in fact. And they have not seen their bike share ridership do as well. In that situation, you're going to be capturing different types of people. So you're mainly going to be capturing the people who are using it on a regular basis to commute, and they don't mind bringing a helmet with them, but you're not going to be capturing the spur-of-the-moment trips. Now, Boston has tried to sort of have it both ways, and we've done a lot to promote helmet use while not requiring it. So all of our station maps show locations usually within just a block or so of the station where you can buy a helmet. Those are often subsidized, so they can be as low as $5 to $8. We also have been pursuing a startup company that came out of MIT that's working on a helmet vending machine that would be integrated with the station, but that's still a little bit further down the road. But yes, we do see that bike share users, some of them wear helmets and some of them don't, and in cities where it's required, it definitely depresses the bike share use.
Yeah, and I've answered this by text through the interface, but if you accept the user agreement, you are saying that you will wear a helmet, although there is no enforcement mechanism for that, either through Alta or as a local law in any of our municipalities. And I think that one slide that we didn't get to is a graph from probably 2006, I believe, that shows the safety in numbers. And this is something that we've seen in major cities across the world. As cycling increases, as rates of cycling increase, numbers of cyclists on the roads increase, the safety of cyclists overall increases, and crashes actually go down. It's a very safe thing to do, and I think that just rightly so says it's a hot topic. Typically, people equate the fact of not wearing a helmet with not being safe, and I think that whether or not I wear a helmet, and I do every trip, does nothing to change the environment around me, and it's really the built environment as planners that you can affect. People don't wear helmets in other countries, and they don't see it's not a bloodbath on the roads. And from my standpoint, I know a lot of cyclists have for many years. I think the common injury is a broken collarbone from getting doored, so I would advocate you wear hockey pads.
I will also add that there are a bunch of safety features engineered right into the bikes. So they are, first of all, they're just a little bit slower than your regular bikes, and they've got good brakes, and they've got wider tires and all these various things, and that they've been regularly maintained, so the brakes work, first of all, which cannot always be said for people's own bikes. So I certainly feel very safe on a Hubway bike. They have a low center of gravity, so it's pretty impossible to fall over in one of these things or to flip over the I would love to see someone try and flip over the handlebars on one of these things. But no, absolutely, it comes down to providing a safe space for everyone to ride a bike on the street. I think Scott has one more that he wants to answer, and then we should wrap it up.
Yeah, I see we're just about past time here. So someone asked, have we surveyed the impact on local bike shops? I think that 2 years ago, not only did the Globe have a pretty nasty op-ed, there was some bike shop owners that were up in arms about Hubway coming in. And our argument at the beginning was we're going to create cyclists. We're going to actually get people back on bikes that may not have been in a while. And as Jess said before, she has a bicycle, and so do I. And I actually rode my bike this morning to the train, went into a meeting at one square, hopped on a Hubway bike to come over here to this one. When I go home on the train, I'm going to hop on my bike and go back home for that last half mile from the train station. So I have 10 bikes, and I've integrated Hubway into my daily routine. It just makes sense, and I think that as we create more cyclists, the bike shops are understanding that that's what we're doing. And we saw a great tweet from our friend Aaron Napperstack the other day. He said, "Oh, I need a tune-up on my bike. I'm glad that Hubway's here now." He dropped his bike off at the bike shop and then used Hubway for the rest of the day. So this isn't about replacement. This is about supplement. So, and I think with that,
yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, and please feel free to get in touch here if you have extra questions, or if you're one of those people who answered at the beginning that you're working on planning a bike share system in your own city. We would be happy to talk. So I hope you found this useful, and get out there and ride.